Hi and welcome to this episode of Journey to a Dream with me, Beth SB, brought to you by Kawasaki Insurance. So today's guest is another person who is instrumental in the running of motorcycle racing here on the Isle of Man. We'll get straight into it, and the links that you hear about during this episode will be on the podcast page so you can find them afterwards. Let's meet today's guest.
My name's Jonathan Woodward. I'm a current TT and Manx Grand Prix travel Marshal, and ex-racer as we all are, and now I've started the YouTube channel over the last few years, so that's brought so much more exposure and interest to the job.
Take us back to when your racing started then. Was it 2011 you did the MGP?
Yeah. So I didn't start racing until really quite late on. As a kid, my dad raced. He raced classics, not seriously, it was just for fun. And obviously it'll always stick in my mind, but down at it must have been the pre-TT Classic, his best mate actually got killed there. And we were steered away from racing quite drastically. As soon as that happened, my dad sold all his race bikes, and it was just, we never really meant to go racing. Although we were all so interested in it. We came to the island because of the racing, and I've been here since I was 3 years old, it's all I know. But we also had massive interest in motorbikes, so we rode trials. We were just off-roading, it's safe, but there's always that itch, isn't there? There's always that interest, especially here, and you just can't get away from it. But I knew that I would never be allowed to race a 125 at 12 or anything like that, so I didn't even take my bike test till I was mid-20s. And then I thought I might do a track day, and then I did a track day, and I won Andreas Racing Track Day Student of the Year or something, and got a track bike, did another track day, and then it just progressed. You start racing and you have a bit of a knack for it, and yeah, it's so addictive, isn't it?
And in terms of the discussions you had family-wise about that, because I'm guessing it was still possibly a little bit difficult.
Yeah, it didn't really come up that much. We all knew, what had happened and what can happen. And I think it was a case of, if you really want to go racing, you'll make it happen yourself. And again, financially, it wasn't until my late 20s until I could afford to do it. And then you really find out if you want to, because are you willing to put all of your money, time, effort, without any help, to find out if you want to do it initially. As soon as you make the decision, full support. Like, my dad wouldn't have had it any other way than just to give me all the time and experience and knowledge and advice he could. So
you did the first MGP in 2011. What do you remember about the run-up to that?
The run-up to that was, how do I tell my mum and dad I'm doing it? I only started racing at all in 2009. Did a championship on the Isle of Man, won it. It was only the steel frame 600 championship, but won it, and then had a really good sponsor. And he said there's a championship which follows the BSB round called the Triumph Triple Challenge, and a few of the lads had done it. Tim Venables, local lad, had done it. Mark Kringle, was it Mark or Tim, won it? And he said, do you want to do it? It was only my second year, and I was way in above what I should have been, and crashed a lot of crash damage, hurt myself, had some big ones. I was just trying to do too much too soon. And the draw of going to a BSB round is you're on TV and all the rest of it, but you're at the bottom rung of the ladder, and you get one 20-minute session, and I hadn't even seen these tracks before. I was trying to learn them and go quick, and I was just trying to do too much, and I just ended up with a lot of crashes. So at the end of 2010, I was like, what am I going to do? I was thinking about going back and doing it again, because I had a year's experience, but it costs so much money to go away and race, as you'll find out from everyone else you've spoken to. And then I thought, I'm just going to put an entry in for the Manx Grand Prix. I knew that I was riding to a decent level. It's just in the UK, against those calibre of riders, when they know the track so well, unless you've got the time to spend going back for year after year after year and learning it, you're never going to get anywhere, unless you're exceptionally talented. And I definitely don't class myself as that on a motorbike. Like, I'm okay and I can do okay, but I was not at the level I needed to be to ever make anything out of it. And the dream of like racing the TT course was just too strong. I had to have a go. So I put an entry in, and then I worked out, going back to your original question, I worked out how to tell mum and dad I was doing it. It wasn't too bad, to be fair. Mum was more, about it. She's terribly nervous about any of all the racing, but dad's like, okay, if you're doing it and you want to do it, then let's make sure we're doing it in the best way, and preparation and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's so lovely. To have their support and blessing must have been a real relief. And I guess you can't, as we keep hearing throughout this podcast series, you can't do it without great people behind you.
No, their support, emotionally, and their blessing to go and do it is just all I needed from them. And then Dad's experience, preparation of bikes and making sure that, not just that, it's everything that goes around it. It's the preparation of yourself and making sure that everything's in order so you're not stressed out and things like that. But then I had a good friend of mine was an ex-GP mechanic, like MotoGP basically. He used to mechanic for somebody who used to race 250s, and he had nothing to do with bikes. And when I first met him, all we talked about was fishing. And about a year later he goes, I do know a bit about bikes, because all I did was talk to him about fishing and bikes. And he came and helped me out loads. We went to Portugal for a few days testing early in the season, and he came with me and we got so much done and we get on so well. And another friend of mine, Rob Snape, I'll mention, he was involved in prepping the bikes as well, and I just knew every time I got on it, no concerns about anything with those bikes. It's like that peace of mind is just invaluable. You can't put a price on that.
Are you quite hands-on with the bikes yourself? Did you do a lot of the tinkering?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be at the start, I think. You have to be. Once it gets down to the points of rebuilding engines and stuff, I just give that to my dad. But the day-to-day, like looking after the bikes and making sure they're right, I get involved in it. But until it got to the Manx Grand Prix stage where I would just be like, okay, you guys are looking after the bike now. I'm just going to look after how I'm going to ride. And I think that's quite important as well. You can get so caught up in trying to make sure the bike's right all the time. You never think about riding, which ultimately is the most important part of this. So
what was MGP 2011 like then for you?
Highs and lows. So we had some good weather that year in spells, and I remember doing my speed control lap behind a travelling Marshal, and it was behind Stephen Oates, and ended up being a TM with Oatesy years later. And it was obviously living on the island, all the places where you can only drive at 30-40 miles an hour all of a sudden go as fast as you like. So the mountain and things like that, you can practice riding quick on the mountain, especially during TT when it was one way. I'd be up there on my road bike just doing runs over the mountain, just because, I don't say learning it, but it's just fun. It was just fun. But the bottom section of the course, where you can use all the road and you're flying through Kirkmichael at 140 instead of 30, it just blew my mind that I know you hear it all the time, but you were allowed to do it. It was amazing. But I don't think, looking back on it now, I don't think I appreciated what a special thing it was, because I was so focused on just wanting to do well, so competitive, and just all I cared about was how quick was I, where was I losing time, where am I gaining time, where am I good, where am I bad, and how do I do better, instead of just enjoying the experience of riding it. It was only that slight lap behind the Travel Marshal where there was no time on it. You weren't even going quick. You were just having a look around. You saw people, and it was that was the time I enjoyed it for just riding. The rest of it was just, I've just got to do well. I've got to compete.
So you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, really.
Maybe to a degree, but it's always the way I've been. So I only have fun if I do well. So if I'm not doing well, I don't have fun, and so I wanted to just do a good job all the time. And people talk about nerves before a race or things, and people get terribly nervous, as you can imagine, and I did, but it wasn't nerves of anything happening going wrong. It was just not doing the best I could do and knowing that you have to wait another year to have another go at it, as opposed to club racing. There's another one next week, so if you mess it up, we get another go next week to put it right. And it was just the constant worry of not doing the best you could do is what made me nervous about racing. And
do you remember where you placed in that first MGP?
Yeah, really interesting one. There was a young lad, and a lot of people won't remember him, called Wayne Hamilton, Irish racer. And he was riding through the ranks, doing really well, had a good bike. And just before the Manx Grand Prix, well, obviously I haven't got it anymore, but it was the Ulster Grand Prix, and I knew this guy was racing the Manx this year. He was going to be a newcomer, and I'm thinking, oh God, we're going to have to try and beat Wayne. Obviously he was a newcomer to the island, so we were all in the same boat, but I watched him beat John McGuinness at the Ulster, and I'm thinking, how am we ever going to beat a guy who's just beat John McGuinness in a fair-to-fair race? And Wayne was way quicker than the rest of us, way quicker. But the next group of us were really close, so I'd had an okay practice week, but I blew an engine up in the middle of it, so then we had to do a rebuild. I didn't get many laps, maybe 6 or 7 laps. They were practice weeks, you're still learning the track. But I was confident for the race. I remember the race was a really nice night, so we used to have the newcomers race just for the newcomers. It was on the Saturday night at the end of practice week. It was a beautiful evening. Set off, and obviously they rank you. I say rank you, they seed you on how they think you're going to do. So Wayne Hamilton went off at number 1. I hadn't done a single road race, so all I'd done is 2 seasons of basically club racing, some decent results here and there, and they go, so they give me number 15, which was fine. I think there might have been 14 newcomers that year. I got moved up to 12 for the race, but we set off, and I caught number 11 by Union Mills. So you knew there was this issue of, I think I should have had a higher start number, but I passed a few more people on that lap. I got to the end of lap 1. It was a 3-lap race, so we were all going to pit at the end of the first lap. Had a pit board. I think I was in P3 or P2, and I came into Governor's Dip, and I caught number 4 on the road, and he'd gone really wide on the entrance to it, and as he came back in, I'd come round, and he clipped beside of me, and I went into the wall at the bottom, broke the bike in half. It actually snapped the bike in half. So yeah, it's like, people say you shouldn't be trying to pass through there. That's what I was being told, and I wasn't trying to pass. I just went through on a normal line. He'd gone really wide and come back across. Didn't see me. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't my fault. It was just one of those things. But that immediate sense of, you can only be a newcomer once, you can't do it again, and that chance is gone now forever, and so mad. And as it turns out, Wayne's pit stop, he had a massive problem with the bike and lost about a minute. So I would have come out the pits leading the race, and who knows, you can't look at things like that and say, well, this would have happened or that would have happened, because something else could have, you just don't know. So but yeah, it still goes over my head.
Oh, it's hard to be philosophical, isn't it, when you do go through the what ifs? But I guess you are in that position now where a race is a very long time, isn't it? And actually to come out of it, you unscathed, but having to build the bike back up again, yeah.
It was a really tough year, and back then you could do, if you did the newcomers, you could then choose to do the junior or the senior as well. And I couldn't get an entry for the junior. I think it was over, so I said, I'll go in the senior, it's fine. And I started number 71, and I finished like 45th. And they used to send us out in the wet then, so I was out. It was dampish. I suppose I should mention as well, really, Wayne won that race. He lost some time in the pits, but he won the race. And then 2 or 3 days later in the junior, he was actually killed. So that was a proper wet race, and I remember that day specifically because we were in the paddock rebuilding the bike. I'd crashed in the newcomers race, and the junior race was being set off, and it was like sketchy conditions, and we had 13th milestone, and like I've been to lots of incidents, and as a travel marshal you deal with things in different ways, but I always think of him at 13th, even though I wasn't in the race, I wasn't even there. It's just something about him and that year really sticks with me. So yeah, he would have gone on to be like proper TT superstar as well. He was just so talented. So massive loss, and yeah, real shame, that one, real shame.
And I think for people who aren't in this world, who don't do what you do, this is possibly one of the hardest things to comprehend. It's how those tragedies can happen. How do you keep going? How do you still think, actually, that's happened, you have to almost put it to one side and then you go out again?
It's that old thing, what happened to me, will it? It's just somebody else. He made a mistake, I wouldn't do that. Of course I wouldn't. You have to have that part of your mind, I think, where if you start thinking about all the what ifs and what could be's, you'd never get on the bike, you'd never go out. You have to sort of convince yourself that, well, I'm different, this wouldn't happen to me. It's never going to happen to me. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. You have to think that way, or you just wouldn't go back out.
So you came back in 2012. I think you had a 6th place finish in 2012. Was that good enough for you? I mean, it sounds amazing, but was it good enough for you and your standards?
Looking back on it now, it should have been, because I'd only had that year, and I had that crash, and then terrible senior race where I just wanted to get a finish. I didn't even get a replica. I just wanted to finish the race, got a little medal. And 2012, I didn't do much riding leading up to it, but my whole year was focused on just doing the Grand Prix. We came back again I was riding the Triumph again, but it was completely standard, and I say it's so important. It makes such a difference if you've got a fast bike here, because you can make up a lot of time in places where it's just free time on the straights. But we brought back a standard bike again, so I was on a slow bike, but I thought it's only my 2nd year, it's just another learning year really. And as we went through, I think at the end of the first night of practice, I was top 3 or 4. Everything just clicked for me that year. I was just riding, not trying hard, and I was just constantly in the top 5, 6 in practice. The junior race, to be honest, I don't remember too much about it. Just went out and just rode round, had one pit board, and it just kept saying like P5, P6, and it's just like, okay, we'll just keep riding. And I knew I was giving up so much time on the straights. The most frustrating thing at the end of the junior was like, if I'd had a fast bike, I could have been on the podium. But I was very confident going to the senior, because I felt like I was still learning so much. Every lap I was still learning, and I just wanted to try and get on the podium in the senior. But the forecast was a bit sketchy again for the senior, but I knew that played to my advantage, because it wouldn't be so much about who's got the fastest bike anymore. It would be about who can ride the best. The worst part about that year for me was because the previous year was my first year and I'd only had one finish, and it was like 40th. They gave me a start number of 48 for the senior. The junior actually got moved up to 22 because there was a spare spot, and I went before the senior race, I was like, are you moving me up for the senior race and where I start? And they go, no, there's no free spots for you. I said, but I qualified like 5th and I finished 6th in the junior, and I was like, I'm sorry, there's just, you can't. I was like, okay, fair enough. So the leaders are all basically through Ramsey before I even start the race, and I've got the radio coverage of it, and it's really interesting because they're commentating on the race that's happening on the track, and I haven't even started yet. And then all of a sudden they get a thing, there's a number 48 who's in P6 at Glen Helen as the leaders are coming to finish their first lap, and it was quite a confusing thing, but I knew that if it rained, and it did, that I'd have a decent chance. I went out with an intermediate front tyre. I knew that it would give me that little bit of extra grip, and to not get into too much detail of it, I knew if the conditions were a bit dodgy, I'd have a decent chance. And I started off in 6th, and I went to 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and I actually had a pit board between Signpost Corner and Bedstead, and it was basically just to tell me where I was going to be over the mountain. A friend of mine who was in my newcomers race the year before, Dave Kennington, he finished on the podium and I crashed out. He was doing me the pit board, and I got that board coming out of Signpost, and I knew I was going well. It's like P2, and I was like, I'm going to win this. I tipped into Bedstead, crash. I'm not saying the pit board had anything to do with it. I was just... It had thrown a shower through there, and it's not like that anymore through Bedstead, but it used to be really polished, really shiny from all the traffic. Any moisture on it, it was like glass. And I went down there, and that was a bad that was a bad day.
And did you hurt yourself?
Yeah, I broke my back.
Oh my god.
So it was, I remember losing the front, and just my initial thought, and this was between actually letting go of the bike and hitting the bank, is like, I've messed up this race now. I'm not going to get a chance. And then the next thing is like, this is going to hurt. And I just remember sliding backwards, hitting the banking, completely conscious through all of it, coming to a stop, and just feeling like the ultimate winded feeling, and like I couldn't move. Like I could move, and I could move my legs. I knew I'd hit my back, but I could move my legs. So I was thinking, I'm okay. I'll just maybe need a minute. The next rider behind me, who I'd caught on the mountain, who started a few places in front of me, he then came around the corner and hit my bike. And then he had a massive crash, and I didn't even know this had happened. Funny enough, I'm going slightly off topic again here, I do this all the time, but it was Bjorn Gunnarsson, Swedish rider, and he was in newcomer that year, I think, and he was running in the top 6. He was doing really, really well. Broke his ankle quite badly, came back, went on to do the TT, and I ended up going to one of his crashes, the Travelling Marshal at Glen Tremon, and it was a really, really funny one. I say funny, he was absolutely fine, he walked away, but I turned up, he looked at me and goes, not you again. I said, I am never, ever coming back to this island, and he never has. He said, that's it. He said, it's a sign. So it's, I take a little bit of responsibility for Bjorn not being here anymore. But yeah, going back to the crash, because of the rain and everything that day, there was loads of crashes. I think there was over 20 crashes in that race. But back then, you just carry on, you deal with the conditions, and you just keep going.
And do you remember what happened in that aftermath? You said you were conscious about who came and looked after you, and
yeah, lying there, a couple of marshals, and I managed to get my helmet off, and we were like spitting out soil and things, and then you get this presence of someone there, and it was Jim turned up. Jim Hunter come down from the mountain, probably the 3rd crash he'd been to that day, and I didn't know Jim personally, but I knew who Jim was. And there's this enormous sense of, oh, I'll be okay now, Jim's here, I'm not judging trackside marshals at all. I know what it's like when you see a crash happen in front of your eyes. Everything's crazy. You see it, hear it, smell it, and it's a shock, especially when you've seen thousands of bikes come through, and then all of a sudden one gets it wrong and it all goes wrong, and people can rush around a little bit, and that panic can be infectious. And then Jim turns up, and everyone's like, oh, the TM's here, and he just controls everything. And it was a double bike incident as well, so he was dealing with that at the same time. And yeah, it's indescribable, that feeling of that person who just, everything's going to be okay. It's almost like when your dad turns up when you're a kid, when you've hurt yourself, it's like, I'll be all right now. It's that really similar feeling.
So you were taken off to hospital, and I don't know you well, but I think I've got the sense so far of that actually how much you would have probably been beating yourself up about what had happened. And how was your road to recovery after all of this, both physically and mentally, I guess? Yeah,
I went to Nobles, and I know one of the nurses there, and I went for a scan, maybe an x-ray first initially. I remember her coming in and looking at me with this face, and I was like, what's wrong? And she goes, you've got a really, really bad break to your spine. And I was like, it can't be that bad. I can move my legs, it's okay. And the doctor was there, and I remember them pushing against my feet and said, can you push back? And I was pushing back like, as hard as I could, and they were like, you shouldn't be able to do that. He said, it's one of the worst spinal breaks we've seen with no damage to your spinal column. And I said, okay. I was like, but all I cared about at the time was like, I'm okay, aren't I? Because I can, anyway, they said, the state you're in right now is very rare in that we can't believe you can do what you can do with your pressure with your feet and stuff, but it's still very serious, and you need to go for an operation. We're sending you to Liverpool. So I was like, okay. So I remember the morning of that, they came in and they just pumped me full of everything to just basically knock me out. Down to the airport, in the plane, over to Liverpool. And I'm saying everyone's doom and gloom, but everyone was very serious about the injury and how bad it was and how you're not out of the woods yet because we've got a very serious operation to do now. And then the surgical team came in. There's two of them, and they were the same guys who did Connor's back and he had his crash at the veranda. Basically, their job is to go around the country fixing people's backs. And they're like, it's not a problem. It's like, we see this every day. It's like, it could end up being bad, but most likely, we did one of these yesterday. We're doing another one tomorrow. It's going to be fine. One of them still kept you very grounded, saying, there are complications that come with it and stuff. But the other guy was so confident. His confidence then just made you feel like it was going to be all right. Yeah, within a couple of days I was in, they just cut you down there, and all the metalwork's still in me. It stays in there forever now for me.
So you're a nightmare through airports.
Not too bad. It's titanium, so it only sets off certain scanners. It's just a bit of a strange one, but if you ever get the one where they actually scan you and you see the x-ray, like, oh, it's like, yeah, it's good on that. And if anyone's got one of those sticks with the metal detector and you run up your back, it goes off. What have you got in there? It's like, show them the x-ray. But yeah, it's like a H pattern. So there's a section, maybe like a foot, where my back doesn't bend at all. Can't do the limbo anymore.
In terms of then physically getting back on a bike, because you did get back on a bike, did it take much relearning, I guess, to actually sort of probably have to find a new way of doing things, surely?
To be honest, no, it didn't. It's an amazing... They said if you had that injury 20 years ago, we'd just leave you in bed for 6 months. Just don't get up. Just stay in bed for 6 months.
You'd have been a nightmare.
And then we'll see if you see how it's healed itself. Wow. But now they just bolt you together, and the day after the operation, they're like, okay, get up, get out of bed. I hadn't stood up for a week. I had to lay flat for an entire week, and I stood up and they gave me a little frame, and I went from one end of the room to the other and said, that'll do for today. The next day I went down the corridor and back, and they went, that'll do, you can go home. And it was just, and then I went through quite a bit of physio to get it back, but just do as much as you want, because now it's bolted back together again. It's stronger than it was before. Just do as much as you can physically stand, and it'll just heal well. And it healed amazingly well. They did say to me, you'll suffer with back pain and potentially back problems for the rest of your life, but it's been 12 years now and I don't even notice it.
That's incredible.
Amazing. I've still got a lot of dead tissue. If someone comes up behind me and touches me, I'm not sure if you're stabbing me or just stroking me with a feather. I've got no sensation. But yeah, going back to learning to ride again, there was no doubt. I think you maybe have a day or two where you think, I might stop this. But there was that itch. I needed to go back and just put it right. And
was that another difficult conversation with the family at that point?
I think by that point they just realised that I was just going to do it anyway. So I needed to go back and know that I hadn't been beaten mentally over it. So I ended up getting a faster engine for next year because I didn't want that to be holding me back. This is another little story that I haven't really spoke about before, but we rebuilt the Triumph again, got the fast engine, did some testing at JB, it was fine. I did all the races I had to do to get my mountain course license again. The bike had been on the dyno, it was making way more power, so I was like, all I've got to do is ride it as quick as I rode it last year, and I'll be 2, 3, 4 mile an hour quicker just from the speed of the bike, which will put me in a really, really strong position. And I was riding well again, didn't get me long to my confidence came back quick, I was doing well. First night of practice, set off down Bray Hill, felt fine. As soon as I came out of Union Mills, I knew how the old bike felt. And I was like, this thing is singing. It is, so I was just, okay, let's just keep going through Crosby. Somebody came past me on a 750. I was like, that's okay, he's on a different bike. Tipped into Greeba Castle, and the whole back end came round on me and spat me off the bike. I wasn't going horrendously fast, so it wasn't too bad, but I ended up sort of landing on the side of the bike and going down the road on it, hitting the rector cell, jumped up, completely fine, walked off to the side of the road and watched the rest of the session, and I was like, what's gone wrong there? And the new engine had leaked oil into the belly pan, and as soon as I tipped in, it had all gone onto the back tyre and just shook me off it, which took the confidence straight out of me. I was just so... it's just obviously the last thing I needed. It wasn't even 4 miles in to the comeback, and I was off it again. I rang Dad, said, I've come off. He's like, what do you mean you've come off? I was like, it's not my fault. It's not my fault this time. There's been an oil leak. But we got it back, we rebuilt it again. We had a couple of nights off. I went back out on it. I set off down the hill, and every half mile I was just looking over my shoulder thinking, is it doing it again, is it doing it again? And I rode to Ballacrane, parked it up and said, I can't ride that, I just can't ride it. All that time, money, effort, but I just couldn't commit. I remember getting to Ballacrane, travel marshal's there, it was Paul Hunt. He's like, are you done? I was like, I'm done for the week. You're sort of getting through the years a bit now. 2014, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I wanted to have a go at TT, or people are telling me I'm too big for a 600. I need to get on 1,000 and you can just get a stock 1,000. You can do all the classes on it. It'll be reliable, and I was like, I don't know, I've not ridden one. And I just had this unfinished business that I wanted to win Manx Grand Prix. I mean, I may have gone to the TT, going back again slightly to 2012. I was talking to a couple of teams about possibly doing the TT the following year, but I was like, let me just win the senior first. Trying to win the senior, and obviously that didn't happen. But 2014 had a year off, and I remember sitting there listening to it all on the radio and absorbing it all, and that desire and that feeling of missing out was so great. I knew I had to go back again. So again, I'll try not to drag it out too much, but I ended up getting a Yamaha R6 in 2014. Bought off a guy, Phil Harvey, who's a really good classic TT racer on 250s, and he'd been doing 120 mile an hour laps on that bike, or just under, so I knew the bike was capable. It was really, really good. Got it in 2015, did everything again, preparation work, came to the Manx. Way easier to ride, faster, it was the bike I should have been on from the start, really. And within 4 laps, I think, I'd gone quicker than I ever went. So that, for me, that was just like, okay, I can still do it. Problem was, the calibre of rider over that period of time at the Manx just went through the roof. So in 2015, the guys on the podium were Rob Hodgson, who's now like Manx Grand Prix classic TT race winner and constantly at the front of TT races. And then, quite tragically, Billy Redmayne and Malachi Mitchell-Thompson. So you've got 3 riders there who were all doing 120 plus, and back in 2011 2012 116 117 would have won you a Manx Grand Prix, and now you need to be doing over 120 just to get anyone at the podium. So I think I finished the junior race in 12th or 13th or something like that, and then had a problem with the bike in the senior, and it got to the end of 2015. And I was thinking, I really just don't know what to do. Do I really want to keep doing this and plough more money into it, more effort? Have I had my chance and missed it, basically? And 2016, again, I was humming and hawing about TT, and then I was having a year off, wasn't racing, and this is when Tony gave me a shout and see if I wanted to be a travel marshal. This is where the next chapter begins, really.
And how easy was it for you to make that decision?
Initially, no interest. Wasn't interested at all. I wasn't saying I'd never do it, but I'm too young to do that. And a really good friend of mine, Ian McVitie, he was a travel marshal up until that year, and he spoke to me about it for a couple of years. He said, would you ever be interested in doing the travel marshal thing? I was like, no, because he'd tell me about the things that they see and they do and the things, and it wasn't that necessarily put me off, but I realised just what a huge responsibility that job was, and we didn't know if you were the person, if you'd be capable of doing it. And he mentioned my name to Tony about possibly doing it, and Tony's initial reaction was, no, he crashes too much. You can say that about all of us to a degree, because when you're racing you crash because you're trying, and that's just the way it is. But Tony approached me and he said, we've got a bit of a problem here. 2016, Ian retired after the TT, and Chris Fargo crashed as a travel marshal on the mountain that year, and he was injured and done for TT. There were 2 men down for the Manx. And he goes, I'm just asking you, would you do it as a favour? Just fill in for this year, because you're not racing, no pressure to stay, but because you're local and we can get you through the procedures needed to tick off everything you need to do to be a TM, would you do it? And I was like, okay, I'll help you out this year, but I'm not staying. And he's like, no, you don't have to stay. We just really appreciate you helping us out. So yeah, I did everything I had to do. We fast-tracked all the medical stuff, because you can imagine, we were talking about this sort of time of year, and it's only 7 weeks to Grand Prix, so I had to really go through everything really, really fast, because you've got to do your technical officials, your scrutineering course, all the medical stuff, and then try and learn everything else to go with it. It was a bit of a mammoth task, to be honest. But
coming from where you had been, seeing the other side of it, what was that like? Do you remember the first incident you had to deal with? Yeah,
initially I struggled with it mentally, because the people who were out racing were the people I was competing with the year before, and I felt like I was in the wrong place. That was my initial feeling. It's like, I shouldn't be here, I should be out there. And the first night I was up at Brandywell, and the whole session had gone off without a hitch, and you get a message on the radio, the other travel marshals are on the way back, they're approaching the mountain mile, do you want to get yourself ready? Once they pass you, get on the back of them and come into the grandstand. I'm thinking, okay, well, first night's out the way. And about 3 bikes from the end come through. I already got my helmet on with the bike running ready to go, and he crashes in front of me. Forgive me if I forget his name now, but he gone off the side of the mountain at Brandywell, and you see there's a lot of incidents at Brandywell. Pretty much all the TMs have seen one in front of their eyes there, but like I was speaking about before about track marshals, when it happens in front of you, there's the shock of it happening, but also you need to react to it straight away. And I started going towards him, and I realised I've got my helmet on, so I went back and took my helmet off, and then I started going back down there and realised I haven't got any of my medical gear, and I went back. So, and obviously I was a little bit what the hell am I doing? When you get a message on the radio, right, there's been an incident at a place, and you ride to it, you have that time to sort of think about what you're coming up to, and you quickly formulate a little plan in your head of how you're going to approach it. And because it didn't happen that way for me on the first one, it was a little bit all over the place. But I remember going down to him, unconscious, having to get the helmet off, stretcher. Obviously, Air Med's only a couple of minutes away because they're at Keppel Gate, so they're there really, really quickly. But he never regained consciousness, and I didn't think he was in a very good way, but it turns out he ended up being absolutely fine. I don't think he even had any injuries. It was just a bit of a bang to the head, and I think he was at hospital the next day. But yeah, it was a bit of a baptism of fire, the first one. Yeah, because it happened in that way, I didn't get a chance to approach it in the normal way. I've only had maybe 3 that have happened like that since I've been doing it. 3 or 4 maybe.
And I guess, you can hear Jim Hunter's podcast discussion with me in this series as well. And we did sort of touch on the fact that obviously sometimes you just don't know what you are going to find when there's been an incident. And, you say you can have that, if you get the chance to ride to it, you can have that chance to sort of mentally prepare yourself. But how can you prepare yourself for potentially what could be very serious in front of you and having to deal with the aftermath of that as well?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one to answer. And I think if someone had said to me before I took on the role, they said, okay, well, when something happens, you're going to have to do this, and this, I'd be like, I can't do that. It's too much. I don't know how, as a human almost, you deal with everything you have to. But it is a little bit like time slows down and you just have to just scan everything, take it all in, be calm, and just formulate this plan. But I suppose in a traditional incident, if you like, for instance, practice week, I'll be at Ballacrane a lot, and anywhere between Ballacrane and Kirkmichael, any crash there, basically, I'm going to it. And you'll get a shout, crash at the 11th milestone. So you can initially think of what you're likely to be faced with because of where it is on the track. So there's rector cell there, so that's likely going to be pulled out of the road. Where's it flagged from? So, and I mean, Jim's been through this before, but you need to make sure it's not flagged too early, not flagged too late, and where you're going to put your bike even. Where's the helicopter going to land? Where is everyone going to be? And like I say, if someone had said to you, this is all the things you're going to have to deal with under pressure before the event, I don't think I could have taken it. So sometimes just being thrown in, sink or swim, see if you can deal with it. And Richard, the new travel marshal, went through that this year, and he was quite honest about it. I'm really, really nervous. He was trying to recreate every possible scenario in his head before the event. And it's like, you can't, because it's just too much. It's impossible. There's too many differentials in it. There's too many variables. You just got to go there and see if you can deal with it. So people forget as well that it's more of a case of scene management than it is care for the rider, and that depends hugely on which part of the course it happens at. On the lower part of the course, especially at TT, there's loads of doctors, paramedics, and quite often there'll be one with the rider before you're even there, and then it's your job to just manage the scene. Make sure, like I say, that it's been flagged properly, and the road's in good condition. One of the things race control are most concerned about is, can we keep going? Do we need to stop it, or can we keep going? That's what they want to know, is the road safe to continue. And
is that the call you make as a travelling marshal?
Yeah, it is. Sometimes they'll red flag something before we get there. If there's a massive fire, for instance, or something like that, we don't need us to tell you it needs stopping. That can be made, but yeah, Gary trusts us on what we deem safe in terms of road surface and condition, and also if we're having to deal with the rider in the road sometimes, are they in a safe place, or are we compromising people's safety by working on them there? And if so, we just have to stop it. You're never encouraged to keep going if you shouldn't. It's a big call to make, and sometimes you're on the fence with it, but you just have to be confident with what you see and what you think.
I just think it's amazing to think that you, obviously as a rider in that position where you felt reassured when Jim turned up, and now you're that person for so many people.
Yeah, and I almost feel it's changed maybe slightly in the last year or two because I've got a bit more experience now, but initially when you first start doing it, I don't feel like I had the right to have that kind of presence because you haven't done enough yet. And I can see Richard felt a little bit way this year. I felt like an imposter almost. I was walking around with this jacket and people were saying this, that and the other, and I was like, oh no, I haven't done nothing yet. You can't, I haven't earned my stripes, so to speak. But Anthony Redmond's crash this year is a prime example, and I went to Tony's crash up on the mountain, and I could see the sense of almost relief in his face when he saw me, and he had quite a bad break on his leg, and I was down that end helping them sort that out, and after maybe 5 minutes he started calling my name again. He wanted to know where I'd gone. So I came back up to his head, basically, and it's just like, he knew he was okay, but he just wanted that familiarity. It's that thing again, it's like your dad stood over you, isn't it? It's just somebody familiar who you know, and when you see their reaction to how you are, and we always like react like you're going to be fine anyway, but it just calms them down. Just have somebody just basically look at you like it's just an everyday thing and just calm you down. It's so nice. Yeah. Obviously, I've seen it from both sides, so I completely get it.
One of the other things you mentioned a little bit earlier is a YouTube channel. It's called TT Travelling Marshals, I think, isn't it? What was the idea behind this? What are you trying to do with this?
Initially, the very, very first video, and I don't encourage anyone to watch it because it's horrendous, was a bit of a Q&A someone asked me to do. And it was silly little things like what's your favourite corner and things like that. And it was surprising the amount of interest people have got in the role we do. But the main reason, it sort of like didn't really do anything for a couple of years over COVID, and Jim did a few videos himself on social media about his first incident and dealing with Guy Martin's crash and things. They were 2-3 minute videos, and I re-uploaded them onto the channel. He said it was fine, and they got loads of interest. People love behind the scenes of anything to do with things like this. You see it obviously now with Formula One and Drive to Survive and all the rest of it. But the main thing for me was people see you riding around on your bike and think you're having the best time in the world, and they think it's a bit of a jolly. They think you're best mates with Paul Phillips and you get your bike and you just have a ride round and it's just a little bit like a VIP lap, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And so many people will walk up to you and they'll just go, "Oh, you boys have got the best job in the world." And I remember one very, very specific day a few years ago. I was at the Gooseneck and I got a shout instant at 27th. Rode up to it. It was Davey Morgan's crash, and as most people will know, we lost Davey that day. We ended up having to red flag that because the rector was in the road, and like I say about its scene management, that one wasn't really, because on the mountain it's so thinly marshalled. It's not thinly marshalled, but you don't have the spread of massive marshals and doctors. And so I get there, we've got one guy on the flag, and we've got 2 marshals dealing with Davey. Rector cell's in the road, the bike's in the road, and there's still bikes coming through, so we stopped the race. And we did everything we could to try and save him there, but there was nothing we could do. But we tried. AirMed came and then they tried different things, and there's nothing we could do. And the race finished, and the podium celebrations were on at this point because Davey was one of the last bikes through. And as you'll know at the TT, if there's a fatality in a race in the morning, they won't announce it straight after the race. They'll wait until the end of the day and everything. So we know what's happened, and we go back to the grandstand and had some lunch. And there's just a group of guys, and they're over for the TT, they're having the time of their lives. They've had a few drinks, they're loving it, and they see us, and he comes over to me and goes, "You boys have got the best job in the world. You must be having so much fun out there today." And it's like, if you knew what I was doing an hour ago, you wouldn't see it that way. And it's not that I want to tell everyone about that. It's just that there's loads of things that we do that people don't see. And I just wanted to make people aware that it's not just all fun. Because sometimes it's a bit crazy in this world now, but when people just see you having fun, they almost become a little bit jealous, a little bit envious, and then you can get this little bit of, not hate, but you can get a little bit of animosity towards you because they think you're just having fun. And I want people to realise that it's one of the worst jobs in the world with the best perks, and that's the best way to describe it. And I just want to make people aware of what happens behind the scenes. And it's been amazing. The feedback from it, the reaction to it, and the interest in it never ceases to amaze me, because sometimes I sit there and talk and I start boring myself with some of the stuff I come out with, and people can't get enough of it. I suppose it's that sneak peek, isn't it, behind the scenes of how things work, and people just are fascinated by it. So it's been amazing. It's been really good.
The other thing about the travelling marshals, apart from the fact that you do all look pretty cool with your M jackets on, and everybody does have that notion of, you're an integral part of the motorcycle events over here, that team ethic between you and the friendship between you, again, something we talked about with Jim, is crucial to enabling that all to happen. Yeah,
it is. It's a really close team, and Jim spoke about this, and it's got an amazing balance now of experience and youth, if you like. I still feel like one of the new boys. Although I've been doing it now for 8 years, I still feel like one of the new boys. There's obviously 3 lads who've come in after me now, so I suppose I'm starting to get towards the older end of the spectrum, but it's a really close team. We all have the same interests. We all have very similar personalities in terms of the way I think we deal with things, and even like sense of humour and things like that. And although you spend most of your day by yourself, because we all just spread out around the course, they're the only people who understand what you've been doing and what you've been through in these incidents. And so they're kind of the only people you can speak to about about how it was, how it is, and how you go forward and things like that. And it'd be a really strange job if you didn't have that team ethic. And I think that's when Tony has to pick a new member. They can tick all the boxes in terms of they could be like an expert in injuries. You know, they could be the best surgeon in the world, or they could be the fastest rider in the world. They could tick all these boxes, but if you don't fit into this team, you're not getting in. And it's nothing personal. It's just you need to be a certain kind of person to just be part of this team. It's a special thing. It really is. It's really good.
I just want to touch quickly on your day job. I understand part of it is running a motorsport simulator where you can do a full lap of the TT course.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I've always been into sim racing. It's just another way to compete, isn't it? But you can do it in the comfort of your home. And it's all in cars. And I've always been into it ever since I was a kid. And as you get older and your toys get bigger, and I ended up with like a small motion rig, and then I got into a bit of VR and things like that. And anybody who ever had a go on it, especially because the people I know tend to be into motorsport, they just thought it was so much fun. And just after COVID, we had some space in one of our units down Union Mills, and Pete, who I'm in business with in a few different areas, I said, why don't we just build a full car simulator? We'll run it off massive 30-foot projectors, and let's make it as immersive as possible, because if somebody else had built it, I'd be desperate to have a go. So why don't we build it? Because I'm telling you, everyone's going to love it. And we've had it now for 3 years. I'm big into the technical side of it, all the computer stuff, and making everything as good as it can be. But yeah, we've adapted it now so you can run a full TT lap. It's just amazing fun. There's a massive leaderboard. Everyone's been on it. The Honda guys came in over TT, so John McGuinness has had a go, and Nathan and the lads have had a go on it. And it's so much fun, but it's also a really good tool for learning the course. People say, well, you're going to say that, but I know how well it works. I know you can ride the game with obviously the TT game on the PlayStation. But there's something about, because you can go and sit in a real-size car and it's one-to-one scale, it's just, you can learn the lines. And the lines are relevant between bikes and cars, about staying wide here, late apex there, and being able to pick a line through a certain section of the course. And the fact you can sit in with somebody and talk them through it as well, it's really good.
That sounds amazing. Can people sign up to do that? Can they book a place? How does it work?
Yeah. If you just go onto Facebook and search for the Sim Centre, and you'll see it pop up, and you can just contact us through there and get yourself booked in. We have multiple sims. We have Formula 1 car there, so you can do Formula 1 stuff and smaller rigs as well, and a full motion rig and things. So you can have 6-7 of you all racing head to head on like Donington or Silverstone or Monza or wherever you want. There's a million things you can do, and you can tune it down so like kids can use it, and we can make it really difficult so ex-drivers can be challenged. It's really cool. Yeah, it's good.
Oh, it sounds brilliant. We'll put a link to that on the Facebook page. We'll also put a link to the YouTube channel as well. It's been a fascinating insight, which I imagine is not just the 2 weeks of the year for TT and the 10 days or so for MGP. And I think it's really giving people a sense of just what goes into making it happen.
Yeah, it's nice that people are taking an interest in it now. It's nice to be able to show people what goes on really, rather than what everyone thinks goes on. Yeah, thanks for having us on, and it's been fun.
Jonathan Woodward, brilliant to talk to him. The links we mentioned to the YouTube channel and also to book that amazing sounding simulator you can find on the podcast page. This episode has been brought to you by Kawasaki Insurance. If you want to find out how you can get covered, go to kawasaki-insurance.co.uk. And if you'd like to share your story, I'd love to hear from you. BethSB@manxradio.com is the email address. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.